Hello, Detroit and the world. Welcome to another episode of Authentically Detroit, broadcasting live from various locations here in the city of Detroit, powered by the Eastside Community Network and sponsored by none other than the Ford Foundation. We're also a content partner to the Bridge Detroit publication. I'm Orlando Bailey.
And I'm Donna Givens.
Thank you for listening in and supporting our efforts to build a platform for authentic voices for real people on the east side of Detroit. We want you to like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you listen to us on. We drop a new episode every single week, so turn on those notifications. Today, we are talking about a new journalism and engagement organization launching here in the city of Detroit, entitled Bridge Detroit. Joining us for the conversation today is Stephen Henderson. Stephen is the founding editor of Bridge Detroit and a former writer and editor for the Detroit Free Press, Baltimore Sun, and Chicago Tribune. He is the host of WDET's Detroit Today and of Detroit Public Television's American Black Journal and One Detroit. He is the winner of the 2014 Pulitzer Prize for commentary, and he is a Detroit resident and native. Stephen Henderson, welcome to Authentically Detroit.
Hey.
Hey, welcome.
Also joining us for the conversation is Catherine Kelly. Catherine is the managing editor of Bridge Detroit and was the publisher of the Michigan Citizen for more than a decade, a widely read and respected community newspaper that was started on her parents' dining room table in 1978.
Wow.
In the 90s, she spent some time at Vibe magazine and Russell Simmons' One World. In recent years, Catherine has worked with Quicken Loans, Bedrock, Shinola, and Michigan State University. Catherine Kelly, welcome to Authentically Detroit.
Yes, thank you.
Oh man, we are so excited to have you guys here. Listen, we are so official, Donna. We got Stephen Henderson and Catherine Kelly.
We do. Remember, and then we just had this conversation about what we were going to do.
Yeah. And look at what happened. Yeah. So, how was everybody's weekend? Anybody do anything fun? What's up? What y'all been up to? What y'all been looking at?
You know, weekends don't seem any different than weekdays now. We're all still in the house. I spend most of the weekend sleeping.
Good. I know that's right. I need it. Catherine, what about you? Do anything spectacular or fun?
It's pretty mellow. Working a little bit on the launch of Bridge Detroit, so.
Just a little, right?
Just a little.
Just a little, right. Donna, did you catch up on Insecure on Sunday yesterday?
Well, you know, I stay in touch with Insecure. That's my show. But, you know, weekends are very different from weekdays to me. I feel like I never stop working during the week. And work can spill over into the evening and the early mornings, 3 a.m. So this weekend, we took it easy. And we also celebrated 2 years with my fiance by going to the DeQuinder Cut. That's one place you can go outside. And It was our first date. So, you know, it was a beautiful day.
That's a very Detroit date.
It was, right? And so it was a first date because I just really loved the DeQuinder Cut, and I only went to it for a work event. I said, well, I just want to do that for fun. So he said, where do you want to go? And I said, DeQuinder Cut. The first day we went there, it was like 90 degrees outside, and we were walking in the heat. We didn't have enough water, and the reflection was a horrible first date. It was a terrible idea. And, you know, but he never showed any upset, didn't act upset. We just laughed about it later. So, yeah, we had a good time, and it was great just being outdoors because I remember that you can be outdoors. You don't have to stay indoors just because we have to, you know, be socially distant from each other or physically distant.
Yeah. Yeah. I watched my president, Barack Obama, deliver one of the greatest commencement speeches I've ever heard in my life. I wish he was my commencement speaker back in 2012. I thought that was really cool. I got a look at the Nelly and Ludacris battle happening on Instagram. I don't know what was happening there with Nelly's audio. So I think the new internet joke is if you get on the internet and nobody can hear you, you're Teddy Riley. So they were calling him Nelly Riley, which was hilarious.
So who won though? Who won?
Ludacris.
Of course.
So shout out to Nelly, right? If he ever hears this, Nelly had an amazing run, but Nelly was playing songs that nobody like knew or remembered. Luda was pumping out hit after hit after hit. So I watched that and was thoroughly entertained by that. and caught the last episode of Insecure, that's the show, Donna. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know why. I love that show. It's some great storytelling. Black folks, Larry Wilmore and Issa Rae, executive producers and creators of Insecure on HBO. So if you haven't checked it out, you should.
I was gonna say I'm actually a few seasons behind on that, but I love that show.
Wow.
Steven, you got to catch up. Get with the times,
do,
because
you
now
do.
we can't even, because now we can't even talk about like what just went on, Donna.
Well, I can say, generally speaking, that I don't know anybody who has not had a Molly Issa kind of situation with the friendship where your friends no longer are as compatible as they seem or as they used to be. Has anybody else experienced that, or is it me?
Oh no, I've
I
gone
think
through
that
it.
Not the only one.
You know,
And
I keep reading about this on this show. I know who those characters are, of course.
right.
But like I said, I'm a few seasons behind, so I'm like, what is going on that has broken them up that way?
Steven, it's really easy to catch up. The episodes are only like 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Take some time and catch up so that we can rap about this for real. Because Molly and Issa, like, it's so bad. Issa was going into a restaurant. This was like the last frame, right? Issa was going into a restaurant and saw Molly sitting at the bar. I guess it was a restaurant they often frequented together. And she turned around and got back in her car. I'm like, man, this is serious. Yeah.
Yeah.
And shout out to Michael Jordan and The Last Dance documentary that's been airing every Sunday on Netflix. So it was a lot of cool stuff.
Shout out to Isaiah, Team Pistons. You're young enough to shout out Michael Jordan. That was almost illegal when we were young. So if you were in Detroit, you just didn't like the Pistons. It was Michael Jordan. I don't care how good he was.
Bulls. You didn't like the Bulls.
No, we didn't like. I'm sorry, you didn't like the Bulls. I'm sorry. Did I say Pistons? Of course I
did.
Yes, you love the Pistons. We love the Bad Boys, and all kinds of jokes about Michael Jordan. We never thought he was the greatest until he retired, and the Pistons weren't good anymore. Now young people are like, we love Michael Jordan. Yeah, okay, whatever. Lining up and buying Jordans.
I'm sorry, I came up in that Jordan era. I was behind. I was born the year, the second year that the Bad Boys grabbed that title. So
right.
Yeah.
Was John Sally? I'm terrible with basketball. He was a bad boy, right?
Yes.
Do you remember when he used to have those like parties and those clubs in Detroit?
Yes.
There used to be this one space on like 6 Mile in Livernois, and I used to go to the John Sally parties like in the 90s, early 80s, 90s, 80s.
Yes. He had this party at 696 or 96 and Telegraph in that little shopping center there. And I went there, and it was like all women at the party, and they were all dressed up. Some of them had on their Sunday clothes. It was like somebody's grandmother told them, girl, go. So it was like they didn't even know how to dress. And people stood in line. So I've always been, a hardhead. I refused to stand in line and greet him. But anyway, I had a Rick Mahorn crush. I'll be honest.
Oh yeah, I loved Rick Mahorn too.
Yeah. Rick was the one.
John Sally used to throw parties in the city of Detroit.
Wow. Yeah.
I rolled up on John Sally once. I was in LA, and I was like, I remember your parties in Detroit. And he looked at me. It's always nice when Detroit just kind of pops up on people every now and then.
What a time to be alive, though, man.
Yeah.
I just wish. All right, guys.
Do you remember he had that one party in Palmer Woods?
Well, at his house.
Yeah, at his house in Palmer Woods, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I have a couple of friends. I'm not going to name their names, but you
Name
know them. And they posed as photographers so they could go in.
That is
How small Detroit is. John Sally married someone I went to elementary school with.
Wow. Is he still married to her?
I think they are still married.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Detroit is one of the smallest big cities.
Right?
Man, I mean, we're massive, but we're small. All right, guys, it's time for Fresh Off the Press, news that we are thinking about. If you have pieces that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on our socials at Authentically Detroit on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Or you can email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. Donna, Fresh Off the Press.
Well, hold on, let me pull up the story. Orlando, can you read the story?
Yeah, so the headline is entitled, Whitmer
Yeah.
Settled the Detroit Literacy Lawsuit. what that means and what it doesn't. We got
Right.
an op-ed piece by Nancy Kaffer at the Detroit Free Press.
Right. And there's a lot of confusion about what that is meant and what was possible. What it basically means, though, is that an appeals panel, not the full appeals court, which is primarily conservative, said that it was okay for this case to go forward and found that there was a constitutional duty to provide basic education, and or that the state of Michigan had egregiously neglected that duty. So it was not as far reaching as what some people wanted to say, because it does not necessarily create a constitutional mandate for everybody else, but they did that. And most people expected it to not survive any further review. And so there was a real push by a whole lot of activists in Detroit and other places to try to get the governor to go ahead and settle it so that that moment in time could be enshrined in law. And so she did. There was a $270,000 payout, and I believe $2.7 million going towards Detroit Public Schools that is guaranteed. And then there were some commissions that were set up by the governor to begin exploring what needs to happen next. And I believe there's another $94 million that the legislature is being asked to pay in addition to what the governor, or as part of the payout to the city of Detroit for a neglect. No other school districts got it. And so I know there has been arguments on both sides. I think Stephen and I found ourselves on both sides of the issue when it first got announced.
Yeah, I mean, I covered the Supreme Court and federal courts for 5 years, from 2002 to 2007. So I'm used to looking through these things and seeing what they mean from a legal perspective. And I was really disappointed in the appeals court ruling. I thought, the strongest claim they ever had in this case was the equal protection argument. That people in Detroit, kids in Detroit, are treated differently and unconstitutionally different because they are Black kids. They are African American kids overwhelmingly. I think that is the case that you have to make, or want to make, on behalf of Detroit children. And the court was really unequivocal in rejecting that claim.
Right.
And then said, well, this other claim, which is about a right to literacy, which does not have any federal precedent behind it. The court has never really ruled about this. The high court hasn't ruled about this. They've said a couple things about it, but they've never really established a precedent. They said, go ahead and try that at the district court level. And so my concern was that the district court would have a very easy time of dismissing it, even if you held a trial,
Right.
just because the precedents weren't there. I do think it is important that the panel at the Sixth Circuit said they think there is a constitutional right to some basic education or literacy or however you want to qualify that, and that maybe gives a little bit of a lift to further litigation. But I'm actually really happy with the settlement. I think that was the right thing to do. I think this would have been a very hard fight through the rest of the courts if it had come back to the district court or gone on to the full panel at the Sixth Circuit. I don't think we would have had a favorable outcome.
Right.
And the settlement is a favorable outcome. It gives us some relief. Of course, I'm worried about the legislature and that $94 million. I don't know. I'm not holding my breath.
I was going to ask about that. The legislature wanted to file an appeal to reverse the Sixth Circuit Court's decision.
Yeah.
And now within the settlement, Governor Whitmer is going to ask them for $94 million specific to Detroit Public Schools. I mean, should we be, giddy and have our hopes up, or, what?
I mean, I think that we have to look at all of these rights battles as long battles, not short-term battles. We're not going to get justice in the short term. When you look at the time frame, I believe Plessy versus Ferguson, which allowed for school segregation, was in 1998. It's 1996 or 1998. I can't remember which year. 18. I'm sorry. There I go, Missy. Yes, Plessy versus Ferguson. Really? Since I was born, 1898. Thank you for that clarification. But the actual Brown versus Board of Education, which overturned state-sponsored segregation, was in 1954. Between 1898 and 1954, you had 60 years of battling back and forth, about 60 years. You had Charles Houston and Clarence, not Clarence, oh my goodness, Thurgood Marshall. Charles Houston and Thurgood Marshall fought the good fight to try to change points of view. And they did it through conservative presidencies and conservative Supreme Courts, and they did it through more liberal Supreme Courts. And actually, it was not a liberal Supreme Court that decided on Brown versus Board of Education. There were people whose minds were changed. And so I think that even when there's not a probable outcome of success, it makes sense to fight, to keep those issues alive and to let people know that we're still fighting for you and we're continuing to refine our arguments and refine our efforts to move it forward. So I was really excited when I met with the folks at Public Counsel in 2016 and heard their approach, even though literacy seemed like a reach. And I thought they should be arguing other things, but of course I'm not an attorney. But I was really excited about that because I thought it's about time somebody took a legal standpoint. You know, in the Michigan Constitution doesn't demand, it requires every student get an education, but there is no description of quality. The only time we come down on quality is when we have third grade reading bills and we demand quality and punish schools for not providing quality, or when the state decides to take over the school board functions because of poor quality, as they put it. But in terms of having the right to quality, we don't have it. So I was excited.
Yeah, I'm really interested. And before we move on, I just want to make sure that we overstate what this looks like for Detroiters and Detroit students in terms of what the settlement allows for. There will be a creation of 2 task forces, the Detroit Literacy Equity Task Force. We got a ton of task forces on everything.
Yeah.
And the Detroit Educational Policy Committee, both to make long-term recommendations that will improve education in Detroit. I'm really interested in just how all of that will show up on the streets and in the schools.
Now, Stephen, you may know this. Is there adequacy funding that a state panel has already recommended to the Michigan legislature? Don't we already have some very clear and specific recommendations that could be adopted?
Yeah, so a few years ago, there was another task force that looked at funding across all of the districts in Michigan. And instead of asking the question, what's equal, what would be equal funding, they looked at what would be equitable funding, which is a really different lens to put on it. And what they said was that in order for kids in districts like Detroit, for instance, where you have this overwhelming concentration of poverty and historic systemic racism and all kinds of things that make it much more difficult to make sure that kids are learning, you need to spend more money. You need to spend more money per pupil every year to make them equal to kids from much more privileged backgrounds, kids who don't have those kinds of those hurdles in front of them. And that was a huge finding. Of course, we live in a state where the legislature has been controlled by the Republican Party for some time, and it's just not likely that they're going to do very much with it. But if you look at some other states, states that are lapping us right now in terms of outcome,
that's right.
They've done this. Massachusetts is
Exactly.
probably the best example, where they spend a lot more per student right now in the city of Boston than they do in wealthy suburbs. And here's the outcome that I love to always kind of repeat. Kids in Boston are doing better on tests and grades and college entrance and graduation than kids in the wealthy districts in Michigan. So it's not just that they're outperforming their counterparts in urban districts, they are performing at or above the level of kids who don't have those kinds of impediments in front of them. So it's a real testament to the idea that money matters, and if you spend money in the right way, you get outcomes. But we're gonna have to wait a long time, I think, in Michigan to have that experiment take place because of who's in charge.
Well, and also because I'm really excited about Bridge Detroit, and I can't wait to get to this later because people, even Democrats, even Detroiters, have bought into the myth that money doesn't matter. Um, oh, well, money doesn't change everything. You can't throw money down. And I've heard advocates and good people repeating that mythology because it's been, if you say, I'll tell a lie often enough, people start believing it. Even after Proposal A, school funding was never equalized in Michigan. You had districts that always had more money,
That's right,
treated as hold harmless districts, and they were allowed to generate more money from local taxation as well as getting money from the state. Because what Proposal A does is not only restricts what the state is going to spend, but also what school districts are allowed to generate through local taxation. So Bridge Detroit, I think, has the capacity to tell a real story and to bring those truths forward so that when you start changing local minds, when people know more, they start demanding more.
Catherine, I wanted to bring you in on this in case you had a reaction to the governor settling this case.
I mean, the school, what's been going on in Detroit Public Schools has been going on for a long time. And I think, Stephen hit on, a really important point, in the sense of, what is equitable for Detroit's children. This won't go very far, I think, in terms of actually helping Detroit's students, but I do think, it's an important step forward. I think, you still, like, one of the points in the lawsuit was the poor building conditions. And, we know that this infrastructure issue in Detroit Public Schools is an ongoing issue. It will continue to be. And it's still kind of an outstanding question on how will we really create a funding situation that can support Detroit schools.
Yeah, I like the delineation of equal versus equitable. I'm glad that Stephen brought that in. Fresh off the press, Duggan taps DMC's Conrad Mallett as Detroit Deputy Mayor. Kurt Nagel and Chad Livengood at Cranes is reporting. Now, I thought that this was very interesting when this news broke at the end of last week. Conrad, of course, comes from the Detroit Medical Center. He had a chief position at the medical center, but before that, he was running Sinai Grace Hospital. Detroit is a place where the effects of COVID-19 have been exacerbated. So I'm, it's sort of shocking to me that we will now have two deputy mayors. I'm not sure if I've ever known Detroit to have two deputy mayors. James Craig will keep his position as deputy mayor. And I'm wondering, like, what the charter has to say about this, the powers, the delineation of powers between the deputies, and who will assume power. I think the Cranes article mentions that if Mayor Duggan is unavailable, then power is going to James Craig. I mean, like, what do y'all think about this? This is interesting to me.
My first thought is old school, right? So you had Ike McKinnon, who was deputy mayor, and you had Charlie Beckham, who was not deputy mayor, but who was sort of like the mayor's consigliere. And you had,
that's my mom's little brother.
Is it?
Yes.
Yes. But I think that that he brings a lot of strength and a lot of power to the mayor and brought a lot of influence so that the mayor could influence groups of people outside of his normal reference group. What I don't see is, so now you're bringing in Conrad Mallett, and Conrad Mallett, unlike those two that I just mentioned, doesn't really, to me, have the Detroit neighborhood connections that a deputy mayor might be of use to Mayor Duggan. So I don't really see him being able to play a role in addressing some of the grassroots organizing I see rising up. And Chief Craig certainly can't do it. I would hope that he would bring on somebody who had the same character as some of the people who have since left his administration, so that he had more reach inside the community.
Well, he's supposed to be driving the overall health response of the city of Detroit, on the public safety side as well. He's been a health professional at least for the last decade. I'm just wondering now, we're paying, so the arrangement with Chief Craig, his police chief salary remained the same. Like, did he get a raise when he was appointed deputy mayor, or is that salary like earmarked and now we are now going to be paying a new salary for this position? You know, I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember.
But
Yeah.
you know, there's health and then there's social determinants of health. And we don't necessarily need a healthcare professional addressing the problems in Detroit. I don't think that the problems in Detroit in terms of COVID-19 were completely a healthcare system breakdown, although we did have breakdowns in that because our systems are underinvested in neighborhoods. There's not a single hospital on the east side of Detroit that remains open. And in Northwest Detroit, you can blame Sinai Grace, but the reality is we don't have enough hospital beds in Northwest Detroit to accommodate the needs of the community there. So that's a system issue. But you also have the social determinants of health, whatever they may be, whether it is homelessness, joblessness, the lack of access to water, and the disengagement and concentration of poverty, issues that are coming up in city council forums, they're coming up in the charter commission forums, and all of the anger about the tax foreclosures, all of that. So I really think that in addition to somebody who can lead this city in addressing healthcare system reform, we need somebody who can lead the city in addressing some of these other issues.
Yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
I would say, I think it looks like, I mean, from the outside, I would say it seems like Mayor Duggan is really making a move to strengthen his management team. Conrad Mallett has a lot of years as a lot of experience as a healthcare executive in government, with, an election like looming. I think the city is going to face a lot of like really real crisis, from budget crisis to possible cuts in services. And I think a political strategist with, a long history in the city, I would say that, Mayor Duggan is really thinking about, how does Detroit manage its way out of this situation? And also, someone who comes from healthcare, as the city emerges from a pandemic, what does this look like?
Right. I don't doubt that. I just wonder if he's the right person for that role. I'm sure it's a political fix. I just remember what was going on right before COVID-19 happened. And I think that the challenges we face are a lot different than the city governmental leadership is prepared to address. So we'll see.
Yeah, Donna, I think I agree with the point that you bring up about social determinants of health. And I know that there are many folks on the ground who look at that through a lens of community-based participatory research, who are in the neighborhoods talking to folks and drawing and getting this research firsthand and drawing conclusions based off of that research. One of the things that I would like to see is someone with that root and that ear, that bridge to community, and that knowledge base gleaned from firsthand research occupy this position, if it is a position that is going to be squarely focused on the city's health response. I know of groups that have been studying asthma in the city of Detroit for years, type 2 diabetes and obesity in Detroit for years through many different lenses, including the lens of race. We are a majority Black city. I hope that someone can help be that bridge. I think Ayanna Pressley says the people closest to the problem should be the people closest to power.
That's right.
So, your new deputy mayor, Conrad Mallett, will have an annual salary of $162,000 Cranes is reporting, is actually the salary of a position vacated by Bethany Malitz, who was the chief administrative officer for the Duggan administration.
So I mean, there's a lot here that just is very familiar, right? Mike Duggan is nothing if not a very predictable political actor,
Right.
and a predictable manager, right? And there's places where that works really well and has brought us great results, and there's other places where you're like, quit doing the same thing over and over. But you know, Conrad Mallett is one of his guys, right?
Right.
This is somebody he's worked with really intensely and in many different ways, and it's someone he trusts. It's also somebody with a very good record of, as Catherine was talking about, management, right? Conrad can actually help with some of the managerial challenges that I feel like they've had down at City Hall. And so, you know, when things get tight or desperate or you feel a little panicky, you know, we all reach for comfort, right?
That's true.
Thing that we know is going to work.
Yeah.
So the mayor reaches for Conrad. I don't think it's a bad choice. I mean, I actually think quite a bit of Conrad as somebody who's got a lot of accomplishment to his name. I do think that it's worth asking whether he can help with these other issues that the administration has in terms of reconnecting with Detroiters who, you know, I think Detroiters are getting a little bit of Duggan fatigue in some cases, right? That happens. You know, you're mayor for a while, people expect you to perform, and when you don't, in every way, they get antsy. I don't know how Conrad helps with that. The other dimension, though, I would bring up is the question of, you know, succession and
that's
what happened after Mike Duggan is mayor. I mean, I think there's no secret that if Joe Biden wins the presidential election in November, Mike Duggan will be on a lot of lists for jobs in Washington. Now, does he take those? Does he get them off? Does he get offered them? Who knows? But if he were to leave, I think he's got to start thinking about what would come next. And we've got some movement below him in terms of the city charter. The council president says she's running for Congress against Rashida Tlaib. Who knows? Does she win that? And then Mary Sheffield becomes council president. You know, I don't know how all of those things figure into his thinking, but they do, right? No, they do. We know he's thinking about what would come behind him, and you know, Conrad is not a young man, of course. maybe that's not even on his radar. But who knows? I mean, maybe this is a move to try to shore up some of the administrative strength that you would need to try to hold things together. You know, if the mayor went off to do something else, or maybe doesn't even run for re-election next year.
I definitely think he's building a bench.
Yeah, well, that succession question is very interesting and does make a lot of sense. I know some people have also bandied that about.
Yeah,
and it does make sense that you go with people you feel comfortable with and people you trust when you feel like you are under so much scrutiny and facing really tough risks. So I just hope it works out. You know, I always wish for success for the mayor because it really does benefit the rest of the community if the mayor succeeds. And so I'm going to be hopeful that what Conrad Mallett brings is that special sauce that helps us turn a corner. But I do have some skepticism.
Every Detroiter got skepticism. That wraps up the Fresh Off the Press segment. If you have stories or pieces that you want us to cover, email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com or hit us up on our socials on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Authentically Detroit. Now, on to our discussion for the day. We're discussing Bridge Detroit, a new journalism and engagement organization in town.
There's a couple people here who have something to do with it. I don't know.
I think it's my turn to take over question because everybody on this call except for me is Bridge Detroit, right?
That's right.
So I'm really excited about Bridge Detroit actually coming to Detroit. again, because we have not had a high quality Detroit weekly, or how often will you publish, by the way? Will it be weekly, daily?
We were just having a long discussion about that right before. Not sure yet. It's really going to depend on how much we can generate early on. But ultimately, I think we'd like to be every day, right?
Okay. Well, that's even better, because we've never had a Detroit Daily that I can think of that's African American centered or Detroit centered, because I'm sure that it will not just be Black voices in Detroit. But Stephen, let's start with you. Can you give us your backstory and what prompted you to start something new, as if you weren't already busy enough?
I know, right? How many jobs does this man have?
Right, exactly.
I'm not happy unless I have 3 or more jobs.
That's that Detroit hustle.
Right, exactly.
I'm really a Detroiter. Yeah, so I mean, I have been a professional journalist for, okay, we won't talk about how many years, but it's coming up on 30. I was born here in the city, of course, and grew up here, and went off to school at the University of Michigan, and then started my work as a journalist, and pretty quickly came home to Detroit in the mid-90s. Worked here for a bit, and then there was this awful newspaper strike that happened that sent people all over the world, and I left, went to Chicago, and then to Baltimore, and then to Washington, and then came back home in 2007, back to the Free Press, which is where I had been an intern and had worked briefly as a young person. I've been back since then. The city's journalism ecosystem is really different today than it was just 12 years ago when I got home.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot more struggles for news organizations. We've lost a lot of information sources for Detroiters. And so Bridge Detroit really is an effort to try to shore that back up, to try to not just add to the voices out there, but help bring the voices that we have together and have them work collaboratively, have them working specifically to try to address the things that Detroiters themselves say are really important. And so we've been working for about 1.5 years on this plan, and
Wow.
At the center of it is this idea of engaging with Detroiters, not periodically, but consistently, to try to help identify the things that they need to know, and the things that they want to help them sort through their civic lives in this city.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're developing a model to do that, and we're building the newsroom around that idea. And then I went out and found these spectacular other Detroiters who are joining me to do the work. 2 of them are sitting here with us.
I know, right? So I'm going to ask Catherine and Orlando about their journeys. Catherine, what got you, can you tell us a little bit about your journey? And look, you went through Michigan Citizen, hip hop, corporate America, and now nonprofit journalism. And how did you get here? Why are you here?
Well, my parents started the Michigan Citizen newspaper on our dining room table. I can remember being a kid under the table, and my sister pointing out to my parents that the roof was leaking, and she said, it's raining on your business. So my parents started the Michigan Citizen during the second wave of Black newspapers. So the first wave, I talk a lot about, a lot of those papers were founded through the Great Migration and really kind of documented that transition from the North to the South. The second wave of Black papers came about in the 70s. They were more activist, more nationalist, rooted in Black arts culture, a bit more radical. So the Michigan Citizen was founded from that perspective. It was also, we believe very much in getting our news from the people, from community meetings, from block clubs. Your sources are residents and citizens. They aren't you don't get a lead from a press release or a spokesperson. So the Michigan Citizen and growing up in that environment really helped inform, how I thought about media, which kind of led me to New York. I loved hip hop, when I was in high school. I thought that those artists and entrepreneurs were the people who are really kind of defining a new everything. And I wanted to participate. So got involved in the 90s, worked during a time when there was an unprecedented really amount of investment that went into Black, people of color, urban lifestyle entities. And I mean, I just loved it. It was like a really vibrant, amazing time. And that group and that moment, they also kind of did news making and content making a bit differently. Their approach, their attitude. I've always felt like I've been involved in media at moments when people of color were kind of taking the narrative back.
Yeah.
And I'm always really proud of that. And so that's, one of the things I think we really have the opportunity to do at Bridge Detroit. So that's, I was corporate for a while. I worked with the Quicken Loans Community Fund, Bedrock, and the Rock family of companies as a communication strategist to kind of help the family of companies kind of connect with the city and message to the city. But I think this bridge opportunity and the idea, really the opportunity to create an outlet that serves the city and its residents was just, it's beyond exciting.
So, Orlando.
No. Yeah.
You went to college at Eastern and you got your journalism degree, and then you ended up at Eastside Community Network for over 7 years, and somehow you found your way back to journalism. Can you explain why you left me? No, I'm just joking.
I left because Stephen asked me to. No.
I know, right? Was it that easy?
Oh no, it definitely wasn't an easy decision. What's so funny is you explained the journey really quite well. Graduating from school and coming back home, wanting to work at home with a degree from Louisville Eastern Michigan University. Nobody in Detroit was hiring a rookie in mainstream media and some of the publications that I grew up wanting to work for or grew up reading and things of that sort. So Maggie hired me at Warren Connor, and I was on ice that very first year. I thought every day I came in, I'm like, this is the day I'm going to get fired. I had a big learning curve, but she continued to invest and teach. And that tradition continued when Donna came in as CEO at ECN in 2016. And so I would say that the work that Maggie and the work that Donna has allowed me to do and lead and partake in has brought me full circle to this moment. It's only because of my work on the East Side where other opportunities begin to open up, where people begin to notice who I am and what my skill set was. In 2018, I took over as host of Urban Consulate in Detroit from Chase Cantrell, and that opened up another can of worms. Mildred Gaddis, a longtime mentor of mine, gifted me my own segment on her radio show at 105.9 FM. And so the work literally brought me back here. So my personal mission is to lend platform for underrepresented voices to express their power, to express and tell their stories. Going back to what Catherine was talking about, narrative power. Marlo always talked about narrative power, right? And I internalized that. And so when I got back from GMF, I didn't know what was going to happen. And I sat down with Steve and he talked about this. and talked about the position of engagement director. And for me, it was the perfect convergence of my love for community engagement, development, and my affinity for storytelling and media. And so it just sort of happened. It wasn't easy to leave you, Donna, and I haven't technically left.
Yeah, I'm just teasing you because you can't hide from your calling, right? When there's a calling on you, you've got to follow that, and nobody should try to stand in the way, because that's not, come on, that'll put you in a spiritually bad place. But
I know, and you did. Let me tell you, I cried. I'm like, and she was like, "Stop it! Stop crying! You're gonna do this, and wipe your face before you leave my office. I don't want people thinking I cussed you out." I mean, it was
right. He was like, I was like, oh my goodness, you can ruin my reputation around here. But I think right now one of the things that comes to mind is that we live in an information age, and I used to think that was a good thing, that people had access to just about every type of information they wanted. I go out there on the World Wide Web and I read and I see a lot of things. I learn a lot of things just through personal research on one of my nicknames is Google. So you can imagine how that works. Somebody tells me something and I try to look it up and see if they're telling me the truth. And do I need to contradict them? All the way through grad school, I was like the annoying classmate. And so, you have that at your fingertips right now. But the dark side of the information age is everybody thinks they know stuff that they don't know. And anybody can be a scientist, anybody can have information, and people just throw around unfactual information all of the time. And I think that it's great because we've loosened up standards such that newsrooms cannot control what people know. But we've loosened them up so much that sometimes what people know has no bearing on the truth. And so I'm wondering how you see yourselves trying to corral in some of that energy to know things and be on top of things so that what we're acting on is actual factual information. Or is that an important part of your work?
Well, I'd say it is the most important part of any journalist's work, right? And it's not just a question of, as you point out, making sure that you have the right information or factual information. It's making sure that your audience understands that it's factual information and not made up or dreamed up. I think one of the things that that drives Bridge Detroit, and one of the things that drove me in making the hires that we did and designing the organization the way we did, was really to try to be sure that that we could build that connection with Detroiters, right? I mean, that is a question of trust that you're talking about there, and that trust can only really come from authentic relationships, right? You can't make it up. You can't sort of paper it over. And so when I was thinking of the people that I thought we needed to help build this and build it in that way, I was thinking of people who had that relationship already.
That's right.
Not people who would have to build it or learn it or start from scratch, but people who had done it for, preferably a really long time. And if you think about just the two we have here, Catherine and Orlando, think of how different their experiences are, but how relevant both of them are to that work, right? They both have this really, really deep connection to a community, to the community, to Detroiters, and their work so far has been about being in that kind of authentic relationship with Detroiters. And so, I think we start with a little bit of an advantage in that way, in that that trust is gonna be there with an awful lot of people. Those relationships are gonna be there with an awful lot of people, and we get to start by saying, okay, you know us, you know what we're about. Now tell us what we need to tell you. Tell us what you need to know. Tell us the things that you don't feel like you're getting perhaps from other sources. So, I mean, in my mind, it puts us on second base rather than, at the plate trying to get on base. It really does give us a head start that I wouldn't have been able to imagine if we hadn't gone and been able to convince people like Catherine in Orlando to be part of it.
Right. I mean, I think of how many times have I seen Orlando have to talk somebody out of a misinformed belief when they call up upset about something, and or they call him on the holidays to check something I said and make sure I was telling the truth, or they heard from another staff person. That's happened, hasn't it, Orlando?
Oh, yes. So many times, even during Christmas. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But, I would say that I think that level of comfort that residents have with the folks on staff, I think is a plus for the publication. Residents have no qualms with telling me what they need and what they're not getting. And so as we build out this model that Stephen is talking about, it's actually called the community priorities model. We're doing that with residents. We essentially want to shift the way residents interact with news organizations. And so I had some preliminary ideas as to what that would look like. And then I realized, I should not come to the table with any preconceived notions. I need to talk to the residents. The residents will tell me what this should look like and how it should be built. So I'm excited to get to work. Our first focus group is with Eastside Community Network residents. So I'm excited.
We're excited too. Catherine, your family, about over 40 years ago, got into this business of trying to figure this stuff out, right? How to make stories relevant to Detroiters during another period of activism that kind of got lost in the 80s. Can you talk about that and how you guys reached out and changed minds?
Well, I mean, I think one thing, one thing that's super important about journalists and media outlets is, we also have the ability to kind of help give a fuller picture of history. So, one of the things that, I'm always particularly proud of, if there's, a historian or someone who's looking to tell the story of Detroit during certain years, one thing that media outlets are able to do and journalists are able to do by documenting, by listening to residents, by responding. So maybe, residents give us the ideas, they tell us what is an issue in their community, and we take our skills and ability and tell their story. We call, the mayor's office or the schools, and we check, to find out what's true and what's not, and we put it all together. But what it ultimately does is help tell a different story about the city. So, during those years of emergency management or bankruptcy, one of the things I'm really proud about, or some of the early times of the water shutoffs, the Michigan Citizen was there to say, no, there were people and community groups who were against this, who talked about this, who protested this in a really early way and critiqued these policies. So one of those really wonderful aspects about being in media is to be able to change the record, especially change the record when it comes to the lives and the experiences of poor people, of people of color, of working people, of Black people. That ability is wonderful. So, I mean, that's the one thing that I think I'm really excited about with Bridge Detroit.
Yeah. One thing that needs a narrative redo, in my opinion, is all of the conversation around COVID-19 and prevention. We keep telling people that we want them to flatten the curve. And I don't know anybody who is motivated by flattening curves, right? It's a scientific description of a public health, need or process that has nothing to do with the lived experience of people. And then when you see people not flattening the curves, it's like, ooh, the curve isn't flattened. Is the curve flattened? How do we know it's flat? And really what we're trying to do is save lives. And I think if we have realistic conversations about what that means and how we save lives, people will comply better than when we have these abstract conversations about curve flattening. I don't know who decided that was going to be the way we talk to everybody all of the time.
Huh.
I'm wondering, if you took control of the narrative, how would you describe what we need to do right now?
It's really interesting. I mean, I think saving lives is where you start, but one of the things that I think has been missing from the narrative is that the lives of people in the city are worth saving.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That and I mean that both in an external messaging sense and an internal one. You know, I think it can be difficult sometimes to get people to recognize that that public health danger matters to them and matters to their families and matters to their community, because the external message often is that it doesn't.
Right.
And you think about some of the reactions that we hear right now to the tremendous toll that this is taking in the city. I mean, just the incredible loss that we've been suffering over and over again. The external message is, well, that's unfortunate, but we have these other things that are just as important, and
Right.
we deal with those too. I think it's really easy to see people internalize that message in a very dangerous way, and not take it as seriously. And some of the things that we've seen about people not getting that message about flattening the curve, or social distancing, or these other things have their roots in that long history of devaluation of their lives, that they've been told over and over again that they don't matter that much. And I think, you know, a voice like Bridge Detroit has the opportunity to try to reverse that narrative, to try to place a higher value on each of those lives.
So we started out our conversation talking a little bit about education, and sometimes I'm made aware of how little the science performance of students in the state of Michigan and a lot of urban areas where people really don't understand science all that well. Do people understand the difference between a bacteria and a virus, what a virus is, and how viruses get passed on? We did a community meeting where we had a virologist come on and just explain the basics of, this is what a virus is. This is what a coronavirus is. This is why it's not the same coronavirus that's on your Lysol bottle, and begin answering questions. And if you don't do that, then people are susceptible to the plandemic video, and also to all of this ridiculous conversation about 5G that they carry on their 5G phones. You know, I think that at some point, part of the narrative also has to be a willingness to stop and explain things, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
I would be interested, I mean, and also really looking at and thinking about, Detroit was hit so hard and it was hit so quickly. I mean, if you look at the way, you know, people in other parts of the state have responded, I think they've kind of also struggled with absorbing the science and metrics of this. But I'd be also really interested I think Detroit and Detroiters really quickly identified, you know, that this was serious. I mean, if you looked at how behavior changed, I mean, there were videos of people doing certain things, but I would argue, and I think it'd be interesting to look at how quickly Detroiters did absorb the information about this and what Detroiters did do through this. I mean, if you saw social media, and if you were kind of looking at, you know, the way that Detroiters were wearing masks, their feelings about being being essential workers. I think Detroiters have been very kind of engaged in this in a way that people outside the city haven't. And I think that is a story that really needs to be told.
Right, but I agree with you. I think Detroiters have largely been compliant to the expectations, but there are groups of Detroiters who are not, who are resistant to that, and who pass on certain messaging. And, You know, how many people I've talked to who have relatives who are young, who come into their homes and go out and hang out with their friends and come into their homes. I have a friend who had to tell her daughter, you can't come home because I have health risks and you hanging out places my life in danger. And I don't think that young woman had any intention. I think that we really have to understand that sometimes when you understand something better, people, a certain type of person will comply more readily when they understand something better. And
Yeah.
go on.
I was just going to say, I think that comes from talking with folks. Like I would infer that to answer your questions, that Detroiters understand in the simplest form the science around this, but we don't really know how that science is guiding their behavior unless we ask them. And I think that's the piece, and that's the story that you know, we want to tell, and that's the kind of community engagement model that we want to even begin to crystallize. What is contributing to your behavior that what cause you to stay in, or what cause you to seem to flippantly not obey the stay-at-home order? There are numerous factors other than the science of it that contributes to people's behavior every day, and that's what we want to ask.
Well, absolutely, we want to know that. But I've just heard so many competing theories about. Somebody said wearing a mask places you more in danger. This one guy was on social media saying he knew how to cure cancer, and I really stopped arguing with him, because if you know how to cure cancer, who am I to throw something out? But, you know, there's a lot of competing information that, you know, somebody, a trusted friend sends me something about pandemic, and I'm having to, yes, disinformation, exactly.
That's what it is. And, so
and that disinformation is partly informed by a lack of understanding.
Therein lies the delineation, right? Some folks know, some folks take in the disinformation and internalize it and think it's true. And so as a factual news organization, I think the narrative has to always be truth. Truth and education. So yeah, but I hear you.
I would just say truth and explanation, because sometimes people don't start with the baseline information. I want to talk about Bridge Detroit, though, and how is Bridge Detroit different than Bridge Magazine, than the Detroit Free Press and Outlier Media, and by some of the other media that you see right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first way it's different is take a look at the staff that you have who are going to be working on Bridge Detroit. Like I said, I've been part of the journalism business for almost 30 years now, and this will be the first staff I've worked on that was absolutely representative of the city in which I live, where the people that we've hired are essentially the people who live here. And that sounds easy, but if it were that easy, you'd see a lot of other people doing it, I think. I think it takes a deliberate set of decisions and actions to do that. So I think that is one of the most important reasons or ways it's different. The other important way it's different is that, so in my entire career in journalism, we've always been talking about engagement, right? Engagement with our readers or our listeners or our viewers. And we typically, when we say that, or when we use that word, what we're talking about is how to engage those readers or listeners or viewers with our content, right? We want them to engage with us and what we're doing. Bridge Detroit turns that on its head and says, we're going to engage with Detroiters first, find out what is important to them, find out what challenges they have, and then create journalism that is responsive to it. I mean, it's sort of a fundamentally different paradigm, I guess, than most other news organizations. Outlier, of course, is doing that now and creating very responsive journalism to Detroiters. We want to kind of grow the model that they have and create more kinds of journalism, more of it, but be as responsive as they are. Our relationship to Bridge Magazine, which is a publication that's been around for about a decade, maybe a little longer, is that we will both be published by the Center for Michigan, which owns Bridge Magazine, which means all of the business operations for Bridge Detroit will be the same as Bridge Magazine. It's actually an advantage that we have when you create a startup. The most difficult part of it really is the business end of it, payroll and insurance and all that kind of stuff. We had all of that taken care of by the Center for Michigan, which was an enormous contribution by them. But we also will have the same kind of partnership with Bridge Magazine that we have with lots of other news organizations. There will be some shared content between us. There will be some shared effort between us to create content and distribute it. It's it's not that different from East Side Community Network in that way, that there are spaces in which we want to share the work and share the distribution of the work. But I'm curious what Orlando and Catherine think is different. I mean, they're coming to this new as well. What's different about this? Why'd you want to do it?
Well, I'll go ahead while Catherine prepares what she wants to say. I think the intention of changing the way news organizations interact with citizens in cities, and the way residents interact with news organizations struck me. I absolutely love that in terms of residents being able to build the reporting priorities of a news organization. I think that's dope. The other dope thing is Stephen said something. He said the newsroom is reflective of the demographical makeup in the city, which means it's majority Black, and I love that. I love that. It's so authentically Detroit. Detroiters by Detroiters for Detroiters, and for me to be able to sort of serve on a team like this is a magnificent honor. We aren't the gatekeepers of the information. We are relaying the information that Detroiters say that they need and want, and for me that's the game changer.
I think it's such an important service to because it really is a service to provide news and information to a community, especially a community that has been underserved and, often not really believed or, kind of the community's perspective has often been discounted, not believed, not listened to. Media has, I think, historically kind of played this role in Detroit where it has, spoken over Detroit and said, no, this is your problem. This is what you're facing. And I think the opportunity to kind of take that back and serve residents and citizens by really kind of lifting up these stories, that's why I'm with Bridge Detroit.
Wow, that's awesome. So what is the role of the content partners, and specifically the role of Eastside Community Network, which you just referenced, Stephen? How do you see that working?
So we, from the beginning, thought that the best way to do the journalism that we want to do is not to do it alone, but to do it with other people who share the values that we have and the approach and want to be part of it. In a lot of instances, that means working with other journalism organizations that are doing, producing various kinds of content. So we have lots of partnerships with existing journalism organizations, the ones that I also work for, WDET and Detroit Public Television, Bridge Michigan, the Detroit Free Press. We've got a long list actually of partners that we've started to form partnerships with. But I also was really, really motivated by the idea that we should have partnerships with community organizations as well, because that community part of this is so much a part of what we're trying to do. It didn't make sense to just report on community organizations or do engagement activities with them, but to make them part of the content. And so, you know, you guys have been doing Authentically Detroit for a year now, I believe. I was one of the first people listening, and I certainly was one of the most excited people about the content.
Which is crazy to me, by the way. And I think I told him that, like, that's crazy.
Right.
And I said, I want that. I want that to be part of what we do. I want to find out how we can work with ECN on this content, because I think it's really good. I think it's exactly in the wheelhouse of what we're trying to create. So there should be a partnership there. And in fact, my first conversation with Orlando about this was about Authentically Detroit. I said, I want to work together on this. And then he said, well, who's going to be your engagement director? I said, well, you could do that too.
Yes.
But that idea, I think the idea, the possibilities for us here, like, you know, working together to figure out how to produce the content that you guys do here, to make it as powerful as we want to make it, to take it to all the spaces that we could together. It was a real easy sell for me. I thought the harder sell would be for you guys, who might say, well, no, this is ours. you can't be part of it. But of course you were very open to that. And again, find me another news organization that's doing it that way, that's saying, let's work with the community organization that produces this content to produce it together. A lot of people would say that's breaking the rules, but I keep saying, why do there have to be rules?
You can say that as a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. You're the person to break those rules and
I just keep making them up.
And so for all of our guests now, Donna and I are implementing like this new question, and we started it last week on our anniversary, and the answers both from Candace Fortman and Kat Stafford were poetic. And so we're wondering what Catherine and Stephen, what your answer would be. And it simply is, what does it mean for you to be an authentic Detroiter? What does it mean for you to be an authentic Detroiter? It's a play on the show title. We get to plug in a little more, but we get to ask Detroiters this question. And just in my short experience, it really elicited some powerful answers. And so I can't wait to hear from Stephen and Catherine. Right. So whoever wants to go first.
Do you want to go first? You want me to?
So you go first, Stephen.
Okay. I'll go first. So that's an interesting question. And I got to say, it's not one I think a whole lot about. And part of the reason I don't think about it is because I feel like, I've made choices that for me, were about being a Detroiter. I've made life choices that were about being a Detroiter. And so for me, those choices were made and I live with them. I live with them every day. And the one that I come back to all the time is the fact that, is that I did move away from Detroit. I was 25 when the newspaper strike happened here, and I had to go find work somewhere else. And I was gone for almost 12 years. And when I decided to come back, there was an opportunity for me to come back, and that was important. but the other part of coming back for me was deciding that this was the place that that I could do the work that would matter to me the most, and it was the place where my work could matter the most to other people, because it was home, because I had such a deep connection to not only the city but to the institutions here. I said when I left Washington, I'm going home because that's where my work will matter the most. And there were a lot of people who laughed in Washington. There were a lot of people who made fun and said, you're nuts. I was covering the Supreme Court for the second largest newspaper chain in the country at the time. And people said, you're crazy to walk away from this. And I said, no, I need to be at home. I need to be at home doing the work that matters. And so for me, that choice, I would say I'm a Detroiter by birth, and I didn't have anything to do with that. But I'm also a Detroiter by choice. I choose to be here, and I can't always say that's something that makes me laugh or smile. I mean, there's times when it makes me really sad or it's painful, but I embrace all of it. It is the thing I needed to be doing, and so I guess for me that is a level of authenticity in that. It was a willful choice on my part. I'm not here just by accident or by happenstance. I make that choice. I made that choice, and I make it every day.
Okay.
Love it. Thank you.
All right.
Catherine?
I think Detroit is a place where you will be checked. I think often, you go out in this world and you have something in your mind about who you think you are, what you think you're going to do, what you think is, and a lot of times it's misguided, it's immature, it's, the values aren't always there. But I think when you are in the city and of this city, you have people who on all different levels who will call you out about it and who will name it. And they do it in a range of ways. Like some can be, hurtful and mean, but some can be really lovely and, a real opportunity for personal growth. I mean, I think about, the different generations in the city and older Detroiters who will tell you why something is the way that it is and how it got here and what it meant. And I think it's just, one of the things I love about being a Detroiter is, people are always talking to you from all different walks of life, your peers, people tell you why and how and tell you about yourself. It gives you this kind of awareness and thoughtfulness that I think is super important. So I think that kind of, that awareness is something that is really like authentically Detroit, which is why Detroiters, I think, create such great content, such great music, is because someone is always like, yeah, that's not good. And they'll tell you, or they'll say, no, actually, that really was really great. Or did you know your mom used to do this, or your dad, or your I mean, it's just that experience, I think, is authentically Detroit and is what makes me an authentic Detroiter, because I know I've been checked before.
Oh man, Stephen Henderson and Catherine Kelly, thank you both so much for being our guests on Authentically Detroit today. If you have topics that you want discussed on Authentically Detroit, you can hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Authentically Detroit, or email us at authenticallydetroit@gmail.com. All right, guys, it is time.
One question. I think you forgot to mention something about the Community Advisory Council.
Yes. So, as we begin to put teeth to the community priorities model, as Stephen mentioned, the engagement will have to be and will be constant. And one of the ways that we want to stay true to that is through the Community Advisory Council, which is made up of leaders of foundations, nonprofit organizations, grassroots organizations, private corporations, activists. It's a really a wide cadre of folks that we've been able to convince to keep us honest in this journey. Donna will be a member of the Community Advisory Council. And so as we continue to build out that model and launch, the Advisory Council will sort of serve as ambassadors for our priorities model, ambassadors for Bridge Detroit, but also a strategic thought partner in how we continue to move in and throughout neighborhoods and speak with Detroiters. And so we are very excited to launch that and have some really amazing folks that you know, Donna, who have committed to serving on that council.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
well, here's to the partnership that we're just now beginning between ECN and Bridge Detroit to produce Authentically Detroit, but then also to get to all kinds of other things that we'll do together.
All kinds of fun.
We're excited about that.
Getting ready to happen. All kinds of fun. Donna, do you have any shout outs?
I do. I have a shout out to ECN's newest board member, Orlando Bailey. You can't get away from me. So we're keeping it in the house. And the only thing I'm really hopeful for is that I was a good enough supervisor that he does not have any reason to pay me back because he is now my boss. We start changing places. So be kind, Orlando.
That you have to tell that story of how that happened, because that's just funny to me.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We were looking at our board composition, and I realized that we did not have any really young people under the age of 30 on our board. We had nobody between the ages of 18 and 25. We didn't have too many young professionals, although we had some youngish people. But you know, that's an oversight. How can you represent a community and engage a community when you are not even allowing young people to be in your leadership? So one of the questions we didn't ask today, because I think it was answered, was what does it mean to have Black people who are in the leadership of a news organization? And the question is, what does it mean to have young people who are in governance of a nonprofit organization? So we talked about that, and I mean, I barely got it out of my mouth before one of our board members asked, so is there any reason why Orlando Bailey cannot serve on our board? And so immediately everybody just jumped in and was really excited. And so they moved and rushed to a vote. And so, you know, I smiled and said, I can't wait to give him this news, because I know that it's a busy time, but we're really excited to have you where you started, helping to guide the organization. And it's so exciting for us to be able to inform each other's work.
Yeah, it's an absolute honor. Shout out to Detroit. There are no new Detroit COVID deaths reported as of Sunday. So that's really cool. Bridge Detroit is launching. Shout out to Bridge Detroit once again. Its official launch is Tuesday, May 18th. You'll be hearing this podcast on that day with a, you know, May 19th.
Yes.
May 19th,
Right.
the whole press conference and everything. So we're excited. Shout out to.
But you'll hear it here first, because you'll hear it.
We got the exclusive. Shout out to Chase Cantrell.
We got the exclusive.
Chase Cantrell and his new project, Next Steps Together, that's happening around Juneteenth. It's a project that will be convening men of color to just have conversations toward healing and shared experiences and stuff like that. I want to shout out the East Davidson Village Community Group in District 3. I had the opportunity to attend one of their meetings and speak to them. Those residents over there are doing the work. And those are the type of residents that we at Bridge Detroit would definitely want to talk to and cover. And the Man Cave event, Donna, the ECN hosted.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a Man Cave last week. Was it last week? Yes, it was last week on Thursday, because we had a board meeting at the same time. But yeah, we had a man cave last week. I think it was well attended. People were really excited to talk about the census. We have decided that we don't just have to talk about the census by talking about the census, but talk about the census by doing things that people enjoy doing. So the conversation was about the last dance as well as other topics around male leadership.
Yeah. So Dylan Brown and Daniel Baxter facilitated that conversation,
Yes.
and it was a good one. So shout out to them, and shout out to one Bridge Detroit partner, Urban Consulate, who will be co-sponsoring the community launch of Bridge Detroit happening May 26th at 4 p.m. on Facebook Live. Anybody else got shout outs? I'm done with mine. Anybody else? Anybody else?
We're good ones. I don't want to compete.
All right.
Well, okay, I come from the hip hop world, so I got
Come
to
on.
take advantage of some shout outs. I just shout out my mom, Teresa Kelly, and actually I think, some of the Michigan Citizen team, some who are still here, Zenobia Jeffries, Polly, but, some
Zenobia.
who are not, Jan Frazier, Grace Lee Boggs, Jesse Longbay, and Kenge Zola, and my dad, Charles Kelly.
Yeah. Wow.
So
That's
I
a
went
monumental.
ancestral.
That's a
with the
monumental
shout-outs.
list of people. That's a monumental list. Hey, Steve, you're good. No shout outs. We got them all for you.
No shout outs.
Well,
Shout out to the end of the school year, which has been grueling on parents, right? It's just, I feel for all of the parents who had to figure out school, e-learning, and all that kind of stuff. So it ends this week. So
Parents and teachers.
I want to shout out President Obama for an inspiring commencement address that helped he took off the kid gloves this time and, made it plain that there was nobody in charge, but he did so much to inspire people. And it was great to reflect on a brilliant president who actually cared about this nation and the people in it.
Yeah, we needed to hear
and I want to shout out the staff at ECN. My sister sent me something last week. She is a federal magistrate judge, and she read our newsletter that we send out once a week with information about COVID-19. And she came back and said, thank you for helping to change the policy for the federal courts, because the federal courts found out about free testing for essential workers by reading our magazine. And 150 people got tested as a result of that. So we try to stay on top of the knowledge and push it out the way that we do. And I want to thank our staff, Savannah, Jesse, Nicole, Dylan, and let me see, who did I miss? Anybody?
Angela, Matthew.
Angela, of course, Angela, Matthew, who made it all happen. We have a great team at ECN, and we stay committed to doing the work even during this shutdown.
All right. Thank you, Donna. Well, that's going to do it for this week. We will see you next week. Thank you for listening. We want you to catch the wave.